Hello everyone, welcome to English with Jordan. Today I'll be talking about an critical essay by William Wordsworth which is called The Preface to Lyrical Ballad. The Preface to Lyrical Ballad is a significant event in the history of English literature. In this preface, William Wordsworth introduced a new type of poetry, and this preface is called the Manifesto of English Literature. So, this literary criticism is on the is on a new type of poetry, and it's tell us that the romantic poetry is going to begin. So why Wordsworth write this preface? Because William Wordsworth and Samuel Coleridge published a lyrical ballad, and it's a collection of few poems of Coleridge and William Wordsworth. So some of Wordsworth well-wisher request him to reveal the philosophy of this new type of poetry. So this is why he write the preface, which is called the Preface to Lyrical Ballad. In 18th century, most of the writer was fond of classical writing. They write poetry by following the style of classical writer. Thus, they use ornamental and artificial language, which was very difficult to understand by commoner. So William Wordsworth was against this kind of writing. Wordsworth tells in this preface, the lyrical ballad, about the language and the poetic diction of poetry. So he gives us an idea about the language as well as the poetic diction. He talks about that the language of poetry should be taken from the commoner, and the language should be realistic, and it should be taken from the conversation of common people, because the poet who writes poetry imitating the style of classical poet or writer, their writing was not realistic to the common people, and there was no. In this preface, Wordsworth mainly prays to rustic and rural life. He says the subject matter and the language of poetry come from common people as well as rustic life. So subject matter of the poetry should deal with the rural life, because rustic life has the universality, and the rustic life is very true to nature, and people who lives in rural area, they are less affected by social vanity. So Wordsworth says that poetry should be written about the commoner. Therefore, if we look at his poetry, we find that the subject matter and the poetic diction. Both of Wordsworth poetry has come from rustic and rural life. For example, the poem Tintin, which is one of the poem of the Lyrical Ballad, and in this poem the author Wordsworth talk about nature and the beautiful surrounding of ruined monastery which is called Tintin Abbey, and he recollect the memory of Tintin Abbey at the beginning of the poem, as he said that 5 years has been passed and 5 long summer, but still he could remember the picturesque surrounding of Tintin Abbey. Wordsworth defines poetry as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. So he said that poetry is not the imitation from something, rather, it's the self expression of a man's feelings and emotion. So, according to him, when a poet or a man goes into nature and when he is being fascinated with the beauty of nature, then what or the emotion that come in his mind, and that could be the subject matter of poetry. So poet will recollect the emotion that he felt when he was surrounded by nature, and in this way he could write a poetry. So poetry is all about the feelings and the self expression of a poet, and which is recollected in tranquil mood. He says that a poet is a man speaking to men. He is different from other by how he feels, by not what he feels. He says that a poet is more sensible and enthusiastic than other people, and poet could feel the general passion and feelings of human being more than commoner. In this preface, he also talk about man of science versus poet. He says that man of science and poet both deal with truth because both of them try to find out the truth. But the discovery of a scientist is individual. According to him, the knowledge of a poet is universal because the poet could share his feeling, thought, and discovery to his reader. But as scientist, he could not share his idea and discovery to commoner. This is why Wordsworth said that the knowledge of a poet is universal. On the other hand, the knowledge of a scientist is often individual. He also tells us in this preface that there is no essential difference between prose and poetry. In 18th century, there was a thinking or perception among the writer or poet that poetry is only for the common people. Thus, they use ornamental language and gaudy expression in their writing, and their writing was not understandable but commoner. Their poetry was only for the aristocratic and educated people. So Wordsworth was against this kind of writing. He says that prose and poetry are almost similar because both of them talk about human being, their life, and the subject matter of prose and poetry also quite similar because both of them talks about human feelings and emotion. Wordsworth also tell us that the same passion and feelings can be well expressed both in prose and verse. So, in this preface, Wordsworth reveals his ultimate philosophy about a new kind of poetry or writing. He talks about the subject matter and the language of poetry. He defines poetry in his preface, and he also make a comparative analysis between a man of science and a poet. So these are the main things which has been discussed in the preface to Lyrical Ballad by William Wordsworth. So I hope you guys will find this video helpful. So I would like to thank everyone for listening and watching this video.